Welcome back, guys, to another episode of this podcast yet to be named. We tried to get this going earlier in this year, or early at the end of last year, but now things have kind of calmed down. College football season came to a close, and now we get into the recruiting world, which I love to look at. And now we're in the height of basketball. We're in that period of time where college football and college fans in specific switch over from college football to college basketball if you have not already. So I thought, why don't we update on what's gone down in the college basketball season this year? Who are some of the surprise teams and surprise players this year? And who are some of the disappointments? Along with some college football recruiting, but we're going to open up with some college football recruiting. But first, I want to welcome Andrew back to the show. He's been on my butt to get this thing going again. Andrew, how have you been?
I've been pretty good. I can't complain. It's been a good year so far. So let's hope to really get this rolling and get the podcast back alive.
Guys, over the next few weeks to months, we are going to be upgrading and upgrading and upgrading. I hate how bad the video quality probably is right now, but we're doing what we can with what we have, and we hope to upgrade microphones. We hope to upgrade picture quality and all that stuff over the long run, and who knows where we'll go from there, as long as you guys are supporting us. So if you have not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, turn on that bell icon. We release daily content on this channel, so let's have a great 2022. So the first thing I want to open up with is talking about what I'm going to call Flip Watch for the top 100 prospects that have yet to sign for college football so far. The big one everybody's kind of talking about right now, I just did a video on him just a few days ago, is Texas A&M verbal commit Harold Perkins. Perkins is the 5th overall player in 24/7 Sports Composite. He's a 5-star linebacker, and he verbally committed to Texas A&M at the Under Armour All-American Bowl, but is still taking visits. He's talked about how LSU, Florida, and now rumors have it Miami are in the running and may sneak in to get his talents, and he wants schools to apply pressure. He's committed, but he wants to enjoy this process and see where this process takes him. He grew up an LSU fan. He's from New Orleans originally before moving during the Hurricane Katrina, and he's a great difference maker at linebacker. Next is a guy crystal ball to Texas A&M once again, Shamar Stewart, who's a 9th overall 5-star defensive lineman, and he will make his final decision on February 2nd on National Signing Day. Said at the Under Armour All-American game, he was between Miami, Georgia, and Texas A&M. And Dan Lanning for the longest time was the guy who was recruiting him. So now that he left for Oregon, that kind of makes things interesting when it comes to Georgia. I believe he's from Florida. I need to fact check that in the edit. And Texas A&M's been the favorites for most of his recruitment, but he has visits planned for Miami and Georgia this month. Devin Campbell is the 10th overall prospect, 5-star interior offensive lineman, crystal ball to Texas. Texas has been viewed as heavy favorites since he announced his top 2. Georgia was the last school he visited, but they did not make the top 2. The top 2 are Oklahoma and Texas. He didn't commit yet because he wants to make sure he just makes the right decision and is enjoying this process. Andrew, what are some quick thoughts talking about some of these guys already? I know you're not really in college football recruiting, but from what I've said, that you find interesting.
I do really find it interesting that somebody would be encouraging a lot of pressure from other schools to recruit him after they've already committed. If I was the school that he was committed to, I'd almost kind of feel a little bit, backhanded by that. Just because why would you commit to us if you really didn't feel that strongly about us, that you really wanted to be here? Especially because to me, that's the type of player who, when something gets hard at the start of the season, they'll be one of the first few players to quit and then immediately go and plop their name in the transfer portal looking for a different team to go play for. So I don't know. I don't really know if maybe I just don't understand the dynamic of that and where that could bring benefits, but I just don't know if I personally understand that choice. But yeah, it's a lot of interesting stuff. It's an exciting time for a lot of these young men in their lives, and they're looking to do some great things in the future.
I mean, for Perkins, a lot of these other schools that he's left the door open. LSU, Florida, and Miami all had brand new coaching staffs come in. So that may be why he's leaving the door open. You know, you only really get to go through this high profile recruiting process once in your life. So why not take the visits to the campuses? Why not make sure it's the right decision before you commit so you aren't one of those guys that ends up in the transfer portal? That's the way I look at this recruitment. I don't view him as one of those guys that'll leave when times get hard, but I guess people might clip this information. And if something like that happens, I'll be shown on social media of being wrong, which I'll admit I'm wrong, but I don't think Perkins is that type of guy from the research I've seen, from what it's taken for him to get here and what he's done at the high school level. It's also the benefit of being a top 5 recruit. I don't think you see a 3-star recruit have the same type of power that a 5-star, 5th overall, one of the top linebackers in the class has. Josh Connerly Jr. is the 23rd overall recruit in this year's recruiting class. He's a 5-star offensive tackle. And a lot of people have crystal balled him 50-50 to Washington and Michigan, but things look to be changing in his recruitment. His final 6 are Washington, USC, Oklahoma, Oregon, Michigan, and Miami. He's from Seattle, Washington, and may even wait till after National Signing Day to commit and sign in March rather than on February 2nd. His connections with Mario Cristobal and the former Oregon coaching staff and their ability to develop offensive linemen played a big factor in keeping Oregon among the top schools up until they left for Miami, and that now placed Miami on his list. Dan Lanning has done enough to keep the Ducks in their top 6, and he just took an official visit to Oklahoma this weekend and loved it. Offensive line staff stood out to him, and he thought Venables was just a solid coach, but also a better man at the same time. He will visit Miami during the final weekend before National Signing Day, but this is a guy you're going to have to wait to see where he commits because he might be like some of the other guys we've seen in the past and wait to sign. And there's no reason, unless you want to enroll early, to have to sign right away. Jacob Matthews is the 36th overall recruit, 4-star safety. He's 61% to LSU and 39% to Texas A&M crystal ball predictions. He originally committed to LSU, but decommitted after the coaching change. His top targets, he's a top target for Florida and will visit January 21st after pushing back his visit. When it comes to Florida, he's quoted saying, "I love it because even though they went to Florida, they still stuck with us. They stuck to recruiting us. When Coach Napier left Louisiana Lafayette, the day after, he hit me up. So keep an eye on Florida for this guy's talent, even though he's not a part of the crystal ball yet. Texas, Texas A&M, LSU, Florida, and Alabama are the final schools, and he will decide on National Signing Day." Amari Abor is the 38th overall recruit, 4-star edge, verbally committed to Ohio State during the Under Armour All-American game and has a great relationship with defensive line coach Larry Johnson, who's sent a bunch of guys to the NFL, but he's still open to meeting with Miami before signing day and may visit Florida, but nothing's written down or said or fully agreed on. Kevin Coleman, the 44th overall 4-star wide receiver, is verbally committed to Jackson State. He kind of surprised a lot of people. Chose Jackson State over Miami, Florida State, Arizona State, and others during the All-American Bowl, and made the decision before he ever took a visit to Jackson State. Gentry Williams, 81st overall 4-star cornerback, has been verbally committed to Oklahoma since October 18th, 2021, as a two-way standout. Mentioned that he's a two-way player who also mentioned the multiple HBCUs that check in for the All-American Bowl, along with Florida and Arkansas are pushing for him. So although he's been committed, he did not sign during the early signing period, and he could be on flip watch come National Signing Day. So I definitely keep an eye on him. Those are the top 100 unsigned recruits. If you guys want more information or more of this stuff, let me know in the comment section below. You go into some other recruits that are still unsigned, or maybe keep you guys updated on these guys as well. Now, I want to move over from college football to college basketball. Andrew, I will fully admit I have not fully paid attention to basketball. Right before we record this podcast, I watched my first non-Wisconsin basketball game from start to finish just a few minutes ago, Illinois-Purdue. So for us football fans that are now transitioning to college basketball to keep that fandom going, or we just love a specific college team, why don't you update us on what's going on compared to the preseason polls and now, and some of the crazy things that have happened so far?
Absolutely, yeah. There's been a lot that has happened. There's been a lot of shockers that we never could have predicted at the start of the season. Teams that were picked in the bottom half of their conference playing like top level talent in the nation so far. And some teams that we thought would be national championship contenders just not really showing up in the early parts of the season. And some of these contenders were heavily based in transfers this year. And these teams that are more transfers than they are recruited players and developed players seem to have been struggling so far at this point in the year. Some big names to really mention with this is Arkansas, Oregon, Maryland, Texas. A lot of these teams, if you just look at their roster, they're incredibly talented. Take Texas, for example. I believe they have close to 7 to 9 players on that roster who last season or in the last 2 seasons all were averaging over 10 points per game. That's insane for most teams. But a lot of these teams were struggling to really get chemistry and role allocation down for this year. And teams that had that many transfers seem to be struggling. The two bright teams with transfers that we've seen so far have been Texas Tech and Kentucky. I don't really have a great answer as to why Kentucky hasn't had some of these similar issues. But Texas Tech, probably the easy answer would just be it's their identity being defensive basketball. It's okay when there's offensive lulls in their game because they won't let the other team score either. So a lot of that is just kudos to Coach Mark Adams and finding guys who will put the clamps down on that end of the floor. But yeah, a lot of these teams who heavily relied on transfers have quickly fallen or completely dropped out of the AP top 25 since the first week of the year.
So let's go conference by conference. How has the ACC looked all season long?
The ACC had another really disappointing year. After a down year last year, they return only really one team that looks like they can go into the second weekend in March. Duke is the only real team that's that noteworthy so far this year. Yes, Miami had a really big upset I believe it was in Durham. So there are teams that could maybe give them a little bit of trouble in conference play, such as Miami, maybe Florida State, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, and North Carolina. But overall, the ACC just has not been good this year. And it'll be shocking if they get too many more than 2, maybe 3 or 4 bids when March rolls around.
The conference we are both big fans of, as me, a Wisconsin grad, and you still in school there, the Big Ten. What are some of the things? I know in the Purdue-Illinois game, Illinois really pushed Purdue to the edge as Purdue almost blew another game, as the announcers constantly talked about. But what are your thoughts on the Big Ten so far this season?
It is. It's going to be a very competitive conference. I believe that there could legitimately be a first All-American team with just Big Ten players. There's that many great players in the Big Ten. The biggest shock of this year so far actually has been the Wisconsin Badgers. They've been able to ride Johnny Davis, who has had an absolutely massive breakout season, who has made himself the front runner for National Player of the Year as of right now. And they have the most quad 1 wins in the nation with 7 quad 1 wins. And note, they aren't a typical Wisconsin team that you usually see. This is the fastest they've played offensively in the past 2 decades, the fastest team under both Bo Ryan and Greg Gard, all led by Davis. Then probably the biggest disappointment would be the Michigan Wolverines. They started the year ranked 6th in the AP poll. They're not receiving votes at all anymore. They're an even 7-7 overall as of today. And they just haven't performed like people thought they would under Juwan Howard. The past few years, they've overperformed so much that people just expected them to be at the top again. And it hasn't happened because of how many freshmen they have, They have a transfer point guard, which has worked out for them in the past, but that combined with the freshman and them not being able to get the ball to Hunter Dickinson enough and playing through him enough has really led to some of the collapses of this team. As we still saw, Illinois is starting to roll once they've gotten into Big Ten play, just now losing their first game in Big Ten play against a very, very good Purdue team, which is a top 5 team in the nation, along with another kind of a surprise team again, being Michigan State, full of a lot of really good players, but nobody really expected them to play like the Michigan State teams of old. And they don't have a go-to player just quite yet, but Gabe Brown is getting there. And this is going to be a highly, highly competitive conference. You can expect at the end of the year, the top 5 teams fighting for that first round bye will probably be Illinois, Michigan State, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Purdue.
Now let's move over to the Big 12. What have you seen over at the Big 12 so far?
To me, the Big 12 is hands down the best conference in the nation. I do believe if they didn't have to play each other every single day for the rest of the season, that there would be 9 out of the 10 teams making the tournament this year. And the only team that wouldn't be making the tournament would be Oklahoma State because of the ruling the NCAA made earlier this year. But, you know, Baylor doesn't have the power that they had last year with Butler, Teague, and Mitchell, but their new trio of guards is picking up right where they left off. They aren't quite as definitively great as they were last year, but they're still a national championship contender. Kansas has looked great. They've only had a few hiccups here and there, and they're finally getting back to full strength and full power. Texas, we've already kind of went over how they're super, super talented, and it's kind of confusing whenever you see an L next to their name, but they just don't have the role allocation right now, and Chris Beard needs to maybe get on his players a little bit more to figure that out. But the biggest shock of this conference has easily been Iowa State. They were picked to finish last in the conference, like without a doubt. And under their new coach, TJ Otzelberger, they have stormed to become one of the best defensive teams in the nation. And that is keeping all of their hopes alive and has even gotten them to be ranked in the AP poll, currently sitting at 15th. Iowa State is going to be a force to be reckoned with, and there are 0 easy wins in the Big 12 this season.
Moving over to the Pac-12, what are some things you've seen over in the Pac-12, or should fans get excited? I know we've seen a lot of USC fans jump over to this channel with some of the videos that I've posted in recent weeks. So how has USC looked?
It's going to be a little bit of an unfortunate one for me. I'm still not fully on board with USC. USC is a very, very good team, but they have done themselves 0 favors with the way that they scheduled their non-conference. The only team that was really that good that they scheduled in their non-conference was Oklahoma State, and that game got canceled due to COVID. So they have done themselves no favors. They were undefeated going into week 10, which is amazing no matter what competition you have. Being 14-0 is nothing to cough at ever. However, they do need to start, playing better in Pac-12 play to keep their tournament hopes alive, which are certainly still good right now, but they can't have too many more losses at Stanford, or the loss against Oregon isn't bad, but Oregon hasn't been what we thought they were going to be. So USC, they'll be good. They'll be in March, but who knows exactly where they'll land just because they haven't had too many true tests so far this year. The Pac-12 in general has been kind of disappointing again. Who knows, though? They might blindside us and just be saving it all for March again. But as of right now, even UCLA hasn't looked too great. The only team that's really been super promising has been Arizona, who has one of the best offenses in the nation, led by guard Benedict Mathurin, combined with some major steps forward from Christian Coloco, Tubelis, and a transfer from Utah, Kirk Krista.
And then how's Oregon look this year?
Oregon is another one of those heavy transfer teams. They always seem to have one guy show up every single night, whether if it's Jacob Young, Quincy Guerrier, Will Richardson. Their big guy play is not been as solid. In the 2 games against USC and UCLA, Nafale Dante had really good games, but that was more dependent upon the guards being able to dribble, penetrate, and find him really good looks right underneath the bucket. So it's hard to know what they're going to do. They had an extremely disappointing start to the year, but have had a good bounce back in the past week with a 3-0 week, including Oregon State, UCLA, and USC. So if they can continue moving forward like they did this past week, they'll be in March, but it's kind of hard to know if they're ever going to truly get that chemistry down and gel together.
So let's move over to the SEC, who did amazing things this season in college football. But how have they done in college basketball?
This is the best SEC I think I can ever recall. Hands down. They have 7 to 8 teams that should look to literally march into March with flying colors. They've had some confusing teams like Alabama, who have wins against teams like Gonzaga, but losses to teams like Memphis. So that's kind of up in the air. Same with Arkansas, who, is dealing with the same transfer struggles. But they also have had some absolute bright spots in teams like Auburn, who, even though they're young, have been able to rally behind Bruce Pearl and just play the style that Auburn wants to play, getting up and down the floor. And it's worked out really well for them. And they're just now getting Alan Flanagan back, their best returning player from last season. Another huge bright spot from the SEC is LSU. This is one of the least talented LSU teams that I can remember in the past few years, but they are the best team that they've ever put out there. They have played unbelievable defense. They play together as a team. And at the end of the day, what matters to this LSU team is seeing the W next to their name, not seeing how many points are next to the individual players' names. And that's going to do a lot of good things for LSU and is going to be a reason that they will probably finish the year ranked within the top 10. But overall, like I said, there's a whole bunch of good teams in the SEC. There aren't going to be too many easy wins, but if you take care of business against the Georgias and the Missouris and the Ole Misses, you're going to make it to March.
And let's close out the big conference overview talk with the Big East.
So the Big East has also had a really good year. The Big East and the SEC, while they may not be quite as good as the Big 12, are the best versions of themselves that we've seen in forever. And alongside that, even though the Big East is up, Villanova is not necessarily up. They have a very shallow team, not really much of a bench at all. And they're the most mortal that we've seen from them in a while. So it isn't like one of the normal years where you can easily put down all of the bank in the house on Villanova to win the Big East. However, there are a plethora of good teams between Providence, Seton Hall, who's been struggling recently, but still very talented and taking teams down to the wire, UConn, Xavier. There's just been a lot of really good teams, and Marquette's even been getting wins against really big opponents. And we can see a lot of bubble teams from them that probably won't get their bubble bursted on Selection Sunday. The only other team that's probably worth talking about, this isn't the Big East, this is flipping over to mid-major a little bit, is the AAC's Memphis, who has had an absolute collapse. This is now the second year in a row where Memphis has had an absolutely astounding recruiting class and just hasn't been able to capitalize on it. Who knows if it's just Penny Hardaway not being able to coach or what exactly is going on. But Memphis just does not have it together. And they're a team that was ranked, I believe, 12th to begin the year and has had an absolute collapse.
I mean, another team I want to ask you about is Number one team in the land, Gonzaga, who actually didn't get the most first place votes this week in the AP poll. How has Gonzaga looked? Have they lived up to expectation? Although they're the number one team, are they playing the way many expected them to this year?
I would say so because, quite frankly, the West Coast Conference is the strongest it's ever been, and they're still blowing teams out of the water. They had a 28-point win against a good BYU team the other day, and they handled business at Santa Clara as well. So I think a lot of people are liking how Gonzaga has been playing, and they're playing up to standards. They have 2 losses, but those were early in the year against Duke and Alabama, and they played one of the harder schedules out of anybody in the country. So you can't really fully hold 2 losses against Gonzaga for that. If you put any team in that position, they would probably have a few extra losses right now too. So I think that, quite frankly, while they may not be quite as talented as the Gonzaga we saw last year, I think they're actually more prepared to win a national championship this year due to the level of competition that they have played both in their non-conference and in their conference, due to a 4 potential bid West Coast Conference still being alive. So Gonzaga is the best they've ever been. Drew Timme might not be the best basketball player in college basketball, but he is the best college basketball player. He knows how to move. He knows how to score. He knows where to be for his teammates to get him the ball. And he has the best footwork of anybody in the land.
We also talked about the SEC and didn't even mention the number 2 team in the nation, I don't think.
I briefly did. Auburn. They've been able to play Bruce Pearl's way, the way they like to play. They do actually are one of those teams with transfers that are doing pretty well between guys like Walker Kessler and Wendell Green Jr. But that's a little bit more because there's definitive role allocation for their team. They know what they're supposed to be doing when they're on the floor. Walker Kessler is a rim protector. He's not going to be playing with his back to the basket too much, even though he's 7 foot. A lot of what his work will be doing is outside of the arc. They have one of, if not the best freshman in the nation in Jabari Smith. He's an absolute bucket getter for this team, and they're only going to get better as the year goes along.
And the last thing I want to close out on is talking about your top 25 right now.
So my top 25 is a little bit different, and I know that I talked up a lot of teams that might seem like they're lower than what they should be. But there's a lot of debate on what a top 25 is. Is it the 25 best teams, or is it a snapshot in time of who is playing the best basketball? I try to weigh both of those equally, and it kind of creates this weird vision. Because especially if you look at the bottom half of my top 25, I have a lot of teams who have not been ranked yet put in there, as well as some of the better teams kind of falling in the middle. So I agree with the AP, and I have Gonzaga number 1. I just said a lot about them and how I think they're probably the most prepared to win a national championship. Then I have Purdue second. There's just too much talent on that team, and they've played so many great games. It's hard to put them anywhere else. 3 is Arizona. I don't know if they're necessarily the 3rd best team, but it's hard to knock a team who has only really lost to Tennessee. A lot of people are going to point the finger at me and just shout bias, but I have Wisconsin 4th. And that mostly just has to do with their resume. When you have 7 quad 1 wins and only losses to 2 other top 25 teams, it's hard to keep them down too far and too low. I think that I even was hesitant to put Wisconsin in it as early as the AP did, but they shot up a lot quicker for me. 5th is Duke. They're one of the best teams in the land. There's not too much else to say. Same thing with number 6, Kansas. UCLA is 7. They have the potential to drop pretty quickly, though. I get that they had a long COVID pause, but they just need to pick up some better wins and not lose to teams that are kind of struggling. 8 is Michigan State. 9 is Kentucky. Kentucky just had an absolute blowout win and a historic win against Tennessee that jumped them close to 10 spots in my rankings. So Kentucky is just on a roll right now. LSU, as I said, I'm a very big fan of defensively minded teams. So that will always help them get up there with only, I believe, a loss to Auburn. No, I believe they actually beat Auburn. They lost to, I'll have to check that. Number 11, Texas Tech, another one of those teams that, they did just lose at Kansas State, who is currently last in the Big 12. But to me, that's probably the same as losing to an average team in the Pac-12. So I think that Texas Tech is a very good team. And if they could find consistent offense, then they can be one of the best teams in the nation. Then we have following Baylor and Villanova, two very good teams, just, haven't been as good as they were in the past. Number 14 is Auburn, the team that I just talked up a lot. And a lot of that has to do with just who they've beaten and who they've played. They've not beaten enough great teams yet for me to have them too much higher up. 15, Iowa State, 16, Illinois, 17, Providence. They all kind of fall in the same area where they've been surprising or disappointing for one reason or another. And that's just kind of where they've ended up right now. 18, Ohio State. They dropped a whole heckload after that loss to Indiana, and then a little bit more after their recent loss at Wisconsin. Texas is a team that I had ranked near the top 2 or 3 in the nation week 1. So their disappointing losses has knocked them down to 19. I think Xavier is the second best team in the Big East. They just haven't quite had all of their health and strength yet. So that's gotten them to 20. Houston has been hit by the injury bug, but has played well after it. So that got them 21. And then the next 4 teams are teams that have not touched the AP poll yet. TCU, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Davidson. All of these teams have 2 losses or less. Actually, Oklahoma might now have 3 with this past week, but still 2-3 losses at most. They've all played good opponents. They've all built a decent resume, and they haven't dropped games to bad teams, depending on how you define Santa Clara with TCU.
I think you just threw a lot of information to fans to catch up on this basketball season. Guys, what do you guys think of Andrew's top 25? Let us know in the comment section below. Really surprised at the Auburn ranking, comparing your Auburn ranking to the AP poll Auburn ranking. But, I mean, the AP poll is one of the most interesting for both football and basketball, one of the most interesting ranking systems out there. But let us know who we have ranked too high, who we have ranked too low. I kind of previewed who some people might say we ranked too low.
Yeah, I have a feeling that there will be some USC fans that are not happy with me, but
I was also talking about Auburn. People might say we ranked too low. And what do you think? Who do you think should be chosen? God, I can't speak right now. Who is your favorite to win this year's national championship? Let us know in the comments section below. Andrew, is there anything you want to talk about to close out this college basketball section?
I just have to say there are a lot of decent mid-major teams this year that could be pretty scary come March to some of these mid-level division high major teams. Teams like New Mexico State, Davidson. There is not necessarily going to be an easy game when we hit March. There might not be another Virginia UMBC, but those 2 seeds, those 3 seeds, those 4 seeds still need to watch out.
Guys, the closest podcast out or this episode out, I do want to cover what the tentative plan is for this going forward. We plan to release this podcast every Monday. I'm thinking it's either going to be 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. You'll know come the time we release it. Andrew's going to be the guy who's going to be editing this. So don't worry, we're going to be releasing other videos on the channel as well. I might get 2 other uploads along with this. And then we're going to be posting clips each morning for the few days after the podcast. If you don't like these more long form shows, but you still get a little taste of what we're talking about. We're going to be talking college football recruiting over the next few weeks. We're going to be talking college basketball probably till the end of March Madness. So hopefully we can get some college basketball fans in here. Sorry if you're not a college basketball fan, but that's what's going on. And then we're probably going to get into USFL stuff come March-ish time, NFL draft talk. And then right in that period, we're going to be getting back into college football previews. I hope to actually get every single team preview out this year. Sorry about dropping the ball on that this past season. So that's a little overview of what we're going to be talking about and what's going to be covered on this show specifically. If you guys want some Who Is videos, some other types of videos, or even some articles from Andrew over on the website, once we bring back the website, let me know in the comment section below. I have a lot of plans for 2022 for this channel, and I'm really excited to see. I have some content I really haven't talked about planned that I still just need to edit and throw together. Some long-term projects for the channel. I wanted to save all this information to share at the end. So one of my focuses is fandom. I really love the idea of fandom and why we care in the community building that goes with fandom. So I have this, what looks to be a 5 to 10 plus year project I'll be working on and sharing on this YouTube channel as well through sort of vlogs. Look for the first video of that, of all the traveling I did this past fall. Somewhere this spring, I want to get a little taster out there for you guys for what's to come in the future. You've stayed here as long as we've talked. Thank you so much. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. Let us know what you want to hear from us and what you want us to talk about going forward. And as always, remember to embrace the grind.